Hi, Lauren. Um, I just want to start off by saying that I think the content of your poems this week and the subjects that you chose to write about were just so very brave. I think mourning and the loss that shows up in the first poem in terms of visiting the graveyard and the fact that you use this prompt to try to craft your life experience just really speaks to you being a true artist. That's what true artists do. So, in that first poem, and in the second poem, writing about the anger and the frustration and the loss of innocence that came around your sexual assault case and it being dropped was really very, very brave. I am also a survivor of sexual assault, and it took me years to be able to write about it. So I just want to say that the level of vulnerability that you're showing up with here, and the level of bravery that you're showing up with here, is really impressive. So thank you so much. I do want to address your questions with your poems. So the first one, um, that you had a harder time with this poem to put the senses of a sentimental area into a rhythm, and then also the line format. Let me start with the line format because that's the easy question. I think that's working really well. I think the structure is what you mean by line format of this poem. The two longer lines, the short phrase, the two longer lines, the short phrase, works really well. I would continue to play around with this. I feel like when I'm playing around with a new structure of a poem, um, I like to a new form of a poem. I would recommend writing several more poems with the same form until you feel like you're really getting the hang of it and you feel the functionality of that new form. Um, I feel like what you're saying you're struggling with. I don't know. I think your attention to the sensory detail in this experience are really right on. Um, I think mentioning the different names of folks here, Gary and Elma, Luis, Manuel, Victoria, I really like that. And then Grandma. Um, I really like those details. I think it's working well for me. It sounds like you struggled a little bit in the writing of it, but I think you accomplished it. So yeah, my recommendation going forward, especially because I know you're playing with a new form, is to attempt to write other poems in this form. And you can always use this prompt again. You could always, go out into the world, have a different experience and reuse this prompt. It's now a tool in your tool belt, right? I think the second poem, the trace poem, um, I'm looking for your questions. There it is. Okay. I don't think it's too confusing to read. But I think in terms of the punctuation, but I do think that moving forward, you should consider just making the punctuation your own. Now that you've used the poem to write your own, I think you can break away from the form. And then a particular stanza or phrase that made me feel connected. Um, I think when you said the calendar stares at her apologetically, the clock reminds her time is still moving forward. I think there was something about those two, because it's like I get that you're talking about time marching on, but rather than using a cliched phrase like time marches on, you're making it your own. The calendar stares at her apologetically. The clock reminds her time is still moving forward. So I think those lines in particular really spoke to me. And I just think that your anger is so apparent, the rage, the anger, the repetition of all the different ways, talking about the heat, the salt, um, and building up to the quote that your father says. So I think this poem is really well done. Um, I think the only thing that I would recommend is to move forward in the next edit. And like I said, now that you've used the prompt and you've used the trace of Wordsworth's poem to create your own poem, I would move forward and ditch his funky punctuation to now do an edit and make this poem your own with the punctuation that you would traditionally use if you weren't tracing a poem. So I hope that helps. Thank you so much again for your poems this week, and I look forward to what you submit next week.